Okay, so hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of Beyond the Abstracts. This is season 2, episode 2, and today I'm joined by Adelia Peña. Adelia, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you very much, Tom, for inviting me. For me, this is quite exciting.
Wonderful, yeah, for me too. So, I'll have introduced you in the text accompanying the posting of the show, but can you give a little brief self-introduction, biography? Okay.
Okay, yes, thank you. Well, I am Adelia. I am actually an advisor in a language center, in a self-access language center in Mexico City. It is located in the National Autonomous University of Mexico, which is one of the biggest, well, I think it's the biggest university in Latin America. And I've been working in that self-access center for around 30 years now, so it's quite alive there. And I'm really interested in autonomy, developing autonomy in students in the self-access center, but also in the classroom and through the use of technology. That's one of my passions, actually.
Wonderful. So, I guess there may be a lot of people that are unfamiliar with the Mexican context. So, could you maybe tell us a little bit about like what do we need to know to understand like the education system there, or the kind of background that
Okay.
people are coming from, that kind of information?
Okay, for example, well, in Mexico, we usually have the elementary school, which is students from 4 to 11 years old, later from 11 years old to 16, 15, 16 years old, they have like kind of high school. Later, they go to junior high school, later to high school from 16 to 18. And
Okay.
from 18 up, we have what we call the university, which is where my students belong to, where I work. There are many universities in Mexico, public universities and private universities. My university is a private university. It's around, well, it was let's say created 500 years ago together with the colony, but it was autonomous until last century, in the beginning of the last century. So that's why it's called National Autonomous University of Mexico. It's a university that has the 80%, probably 70, 80% of the research in Mexico in all the areas of knowledge. And it's called the University of the Nation. And in this university, you have to present a test. And in this test, there are sometimes millions of students who are asking to enter, but
Mm,
we only accept 300,000 students, more or less. It is the actual population. It's a very big university. We
right.
have campuses around all Mexico and also in other countries such as the United States, South Africa, China, Spain, and around the world.
Gosh. Gosh.
Well, this is the university. That's what I told you. Is one of it. I think it's the biggest in Latin America because of the population it handles, and because also of the extension. What you can see is the National Library that is behind me. It's the Central Library, and it
Okay.
has 7 floors. No, and this campus is a heritage. It was called by a heritage. I remember national heritage from UNESCO actually like 15 years ago. Okay, in this context, students come here to these universities to study different majors. Could be physics, could be humanities, could be accounting, administration, arts, anything. We had like 120 different majors, plus postgraduates and some other diplomas and technical things. We also have a high school system in this university. But well, in all this idea, we have a lot of students, of course. There is a language center. This
Mm,
language center was not enough because we have a lot of students. No, we had like, well, 300,000. We don't cover all of them. But for example, we usually for English, we have like 7,000 applications to study English.
wow.
And we only accept 1,000 or less, because we don't have the facilities. It's very
Mm,
small. This language center is very small. And because of this, 30 years ago, the authorities, the director in that moment from my school, which is the School of Languages, Linguistics and Translation, is where we have translation major and a languages major, where we prepare students for becoming teachers, language teachers, usually, and some research as well. And in this context, all these students come here to this language center to study English, because in order to get your major to graduate, you need to present either a reading comprehension test or a test that you can handle the language, or you manage the language for B2 more or less. Once you get this exam, you can graduate. Before, you cannot. So just imagine all the students came here to this center to prepare for the exam. There was not enough space, and that's why the self-access center where I work for was created, like a necessity for these students who didn't get a space in the language center, or they couldn't get a class in the language center because of the schedules in the major, especially, for example, medicine or dentistry. They have a very, very busy schedule, so sometimes it's impossible for them. No, that was the beginning of the language center. No, it has evolved a little bit. That was like 30 years ago, and that's why it was born, to give students an alternative to study a language. In that moment, 30 years ago, only 2 languages, which were the ones required, that were French and English. Okay, right now my self-access center offers 9 different languages.
Gosh.
For studies to, which are, let me see, German, Chinese, Korean, French, English, Italian, Japanese, Portuguese, and Russian.
Wow.
In the self-access system. No? And this is where we were born, and we have been there for 3 years already.
Wow, that's quite a picture. It's I imagine very different to what many other people will ever have experienced something of this size. But it also sounds like it's fulfilling a really crucial need for these students to, you know, to pass that requirement as well. So that's another kind of interesting factor there that's going to affect how the students engage with the self-access center, I suppose, right? We can see the amazing building behind you, the library, but could you just talk about like the physicality of the location, like of your center? Like what kind of place is it? What does it look like? What things are
my
there?
Center, my center is let's see, like small, because it's, I would say that this is an alternative. No, we can accept like 62 students at the same time, but it's not something that they must go. They are volunteers. If they want, they can go. No, we have 62 spaces. We have materials, books, games. We used to have videos. Now we don't, because everything is on internet. But now we still have some books. We still have some CD-ROM videos for all the 9 languages I mentioned. And we also have, for example, TVs or computers. And now we are working for having some kind of iPads to get some apps in there.
Okay.
But so far we are working, I would say, in a very probably traditional way, because we still have TVs, we have VCRs or DVD ROMs or DVD players. Well, actually they are Blu-ray players right now. But the computers and a lot of books, and most of the books right now, they have a QR for the audios. So sometimes we download them and we have them in the computers or in 1 or the 2 iPads that we've got at the center. So we have this space where we call it Students for Study, where they have all these books. But we also have a special place for the advisors. We're 21 advisors right now for the whole languages. We are 5 only English, 2 for Japanese, 3 for Portuguese, 3 for French, and I don't remember some others. A coordinator, and we have 4 that we call them in Spanish técnicos académicos, but they are like a bridge. They are not technicians, because they also participate in some academic areas with us, advisors. No, they are like the first person that the student faces, and they introduce them to the self-access system, and they help us with the learning to learn workshops, with the Mediateca, which is a community activity, or with the teletandems. No,
so this is like a kind of student liaison between the rest of the students and the center, and also with you as well,
Yes,
the staff
exactly.
as well. I see. Okay. And like, what kind of engagement do the students do, like with the center? Are they there for, an hour and then they leave, or is it, they are
Mm,
there multiple
ah,
times a week, or?
it's very variable. I think
Okay.
sometimes it depends on how much they engage or how
Mm-hmm.
much they need. Because sometimes we have students who begin the year and they say it's because I have to present a TOEFL test or an IELTS test
Right.
because I want to go to an exchange in another country.
Mm-hmm.
So they are very disciplined, and some of them spend like 2 hours or 3 hours daily, depending on the time they've got. Sometimes 1 hour daily, but there are a few. I think it's varied. I would say that on average, we usually, well, before the pandemic, we used to have like 30 to 40 students and like an attendance of 800 students during the day before the pandemic. After the pandemic, it's been difficult to get back to those kind of numbers
Mm-hmm.
because of two reasons. One is students are now working in hybrid environments, so they are not very much in the university, or they have
Mm-hmm.
other, and they have more technology than they used to have before the pandemic. So, for example, now we have like 35 to 40 students every day, probably from the whole languages in an average. And they spend, some of them 1 hour and some of them 1 hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours or three, especially if they are attending to the teletandems, which are these virtual calls that we got with foreign students,
Okay.
or they stay for the learning to learn workshops, for example,
Hmm.
which are usually 2 hours. And so that depends. But I would say like 1 hour to 2 hours, one every other day, I think would be the ones. But there are some that I spend 2 hours every day, but there are a few.
Okay. So I suppose that's natural with such a big student population, like you mentioned, with so many different majors and needs
Yeah.
and interests, and also different languages they're learning as well. Wow. Okay. So you mentioned workshops there. They're called Learning to Learn workshops.
Yes.
That sounds kind of interesting, quite autonomy focused as well. Perhaps you could talk a little bit more about those workshops. So what are the
Yes.
Learning to Learn workshops?
Yeah, of course. Look, we have, for example, as I tell you, this is I would say a very old center, which is 30 years old already. So we used to have workshops in the beginning, which are like as introductory workshops for the work in the Mediateca, and they were like compulsory. Students, if they want to be in the Mediateca, they have to attend to these workshops. But it didn't work very well in the beginnings. So later we stopped, and later we make some research, and we took into account some articles from Anita Wenden, for example, from John Rubin. We work a little bit with Marie-Joseph Grimaud and Rio Lek, which went to my university to give us some kind of training to all the advisors, with Barbara Sinclair. And from those, everything we've got when we were trying to become advisors in those early years of the Mediateca, we started to build some kind of workshops where we, based on a little bit of what Anita Wenden, I think was Cynthia White, I don't remember right now, which she told about this metacognitive knowledge that the students should have in order to develop autonomy, because we wanted to develop the students' autonomy during these workshops, and we had realized that some students in those early years were not very willing to take this responsibility,
Mm,
for their
mm,
learning. But they were very happy when we gave them this kind of workshops, which not very long, were every day. So we like combine, like we call it the philosophy from the French self-directed learning trend in that moment, what we call it in the British one, and some kind of the Americans that they were there, no? And we decided to make these workshops according to the students' needs that we detected in the advising sessions. For example, we detected that the students had problems with planning, that they had some problems with detecting the way they learned, And we consider them important so that they could decide the activities and the materials. And later we focus on a bit with some skills like listening, reading, and some areas like vocabulary, for example. And they have been evolving. And we work these workshops like in every workshop that we designed, the advisors design, should have like 3 stages. No, this is like the methodology. There's stages that we like to work with these beliefs, okay, and these beliefs that the students have related to their learning, related to the language, and related to the skills. So if we explore the beliefs of the students in the first stage of the workshop, 30 minutes, like discussing groups, they are small groups, no more than 15 students for these groups. Later, when we explore the beliefs, we start asking them like personal strategies they use, for example, to learn vocabulary. No? We explore this, and according to what we had explored, we start presenting them different kind of strategies they can use to learn vocabulary, and we make them experiment it because we think that they should experience and they should see if the strategy works for them or not. No, and later they work in groups, they give peer feedback, they say, it worked for me, it didn't work, I think it worked. We usually have 2 or 3 sessions, 2 hours every session for vocabulary, for example. And with the same thing we do with the Learning to Learn workshop for learning, well, we don't use learning profile because now we're moving to this neuroscientist idea that we learn in different ways and there are no styles, but there is a profile, no? And we don't want the students to tag themselves on that they are kinesthetic or whatever.
I see. Right.
We are fighting against that idea. No, we want the students to reflect on how they learn and how these beliefs can help them learn or can block them their link. So we want them to be aware. And the Learning to Learn workshop is like we explore with the learning profile, we explore them, okay, how you learn this, what you do when you learn, when you study, when you're stressed, what emotions. We're working a lot of emotions in these workshops right now. And this is what the workshops are done, and we have been evolving in these workshops. In the beginning, they were like 3 sessions, and they were in a progressive stages. No, we have Learning to Learn workshop for listening 1, 2, and 3. No more than 6 hours, and it worked. It worked very well. After the pandemic, they didn't work very well anymore because students were we couldn't have the students for the 3 sessions. We have some students in some sessions and some students in other and in other. So we decided to make them independent.
Okay.
I mean, you can choose the workshop you want to according to your needs, what you need, what kind of strategies, and we give them like some kind of topics that we're going to develop in each session. They are still 2 hours, but now they are more independent from each other. It doesn't matter if you went to the first session or you go to the last session. And this is what we do with the students. We help them to learn vocabulary, to prepare for the TOEFL activities for preparing for the exam, how to study for the exam, for example, how to plan your studying for that exam. And these are the Learning to Learn workshops, and some of them are very specific. For example, like the kanji workshop. No, that's for Japanese.
Yep.
Now we're working on some phonetics workshop for Chinese.
Okay.
Because Chinese needs a lot of work on pronunciation. But we usually, these workshops focus on strategies, and they follow this methodology. Representations, well, what we call beliefs first, explore beliefs, explore personal strategies, introduce new strategies, practice, and feedback.
Right. Are these,
this is the methodology.
Yeah, so I got a sense of the clear stages there. So you said the pandemic was quite a disruptive thing that happened there. It changed. I think many self-access practitioners probably would report the same kind of thing. And then you talked about what were previously sequential workshops are now kind of, you can take them in any order independently. Has that reduced the amount of community maybe in the center, or like the amount of interaction, like peer interaction between different users in the center, I wonder.
Yes, it has worked in the beginning when, for example, in Mexico, we came back to the facilities 2 years in 2022. I don't know
Gotcha.
what happened in other countries, but we came back until 2022 to the facilities.
Hmm.
Before we were online and we experimented the workshops online actually. We continue working with the workshops online, but we had to make a lot of adjustments for that.
Yes.
Now the students, they want something, I don't know if it's because of the pandemic, faster.
Hmm.
Reflecting is not very much on them. However, they need it, but they want things faster. So we're making things faster probably, or not no more than 1.5 hours we are trying. And yes, it changed because now we from 100 before the pandemic, now we began with 10, 12. Now we are improving from 22, 35 students every day,
Okay.
but doesn't compare to the numbers we used to have. The probably yes, I would say the community. I don't know if it has diminished. Probably yes in numbers, but what I like about the pandemic, and we have tried to continue, is that we are trying to making a combination. We are having workshops online, and we're having workshops in the self-access center. And the same happened to the conversation circles, which is a kind of workshop, but it's just for conversation.
Right.
And we are and they are multi-level conversations. So we used to have this in the Mediateca. That's the name of my self-access center, and that's why I could tell you we had 100. But now, for example, if I count the students online during the workshops and during teletandems, probably I still have 70.
Okay.
So, but they are not in the center. They
Right.
are wherever they want to.
Yeah. So the kind of form of participation has
Yes,
changed
it has
somewhat.
changed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Something that has kept is the teletandem. No, we have, for example, a workshop for teletandem because it's very important because we are working with other cultures and we don't want to have misunderstanding, and we want the teletandem to be more than an informal conversation with somebody else from a different country, and do not take
Right.
advantage of what the other person can give you.
Right. Okay, so let's talk about that a bit more. What is that? Could you introduce Teletandem
Okay.
to someone that never heard of it before and doesn't know what it is?
Thank you. Yes. Tandem is this methodology or working with a person from another country and learning the language from that person, and you helping that person learn your own language or your first language. No, that's the tandem methodology. We call them teletandem because tandem used to be face to face, and we are now using video calls, using Zoom. A long time ago, Skype. We can use Teams as well, for example,
Mhm.
or some other apps that you can that are now on the market. No, in these video calls, we join one student from a university in a foreign university that is not, and one of my students, and they make a video call in a certain time. So for example, and they speak 30 minutes or 25 minutes in English, for example. 5 minutes they give peer feedback in the sense that my student receives feedback for his English, for example,
Uh-huh.
from the
Uh-huh.
native speaker or the competent speaker. And later my student, they start speaking in Spanish, and because the other student is learning Spanish, and 5 minutes where my student gives feedback about their Spanish. The feedback is not something very complex. It's just something your performance was very well, something you need to work with, or some kind of advice that could be idiomatic expressions, could be culture,
I see.
things like that. No? And they join for 8 sessions. We have two kind of programs. One is where students develop their autonomy, with a certain kind of autonomy, because they manage, they manage time and days where they meet. And they design some topics. I say certain kind because superficial autonomy for me just to develop that part, no?
Yeah.
And the other is, for example, we offer sessions every week at certain time, and students connect and we pair them using Zoom, for
Okay.
example. We make small
Hmm.
rooms, and this is the Teletandem. We
Okay.
have Teletandem for the 9 languages I mentioned,
Gosh.
no? So
Yeah.
it's working with different cultures, working with Japanese, working with Koreans, with Russians, with Chinese people.
Okay. I think I have many questions about how this works. It's
It's
like
very
is
complex.
it
We began
it sounds
15 years
complex.
ago with this,
Mm,
with only
okay.
English. We started with English. We started with the United States, which is the closest, and the time
Right.
difference is not so big.
I was going to mention about the time challenges you must face. Even you and I arranging this particular meeting today, we had to work with that. So I can only imagine with the students. Yeah.
Yes, it's very difficult. And for example, this workshop is very important because in this workshop, we make them aware of the difference, time difference, but also we ask them to be like empathic, and it's because they are working with another student who is learning Spanish, who is having the same difficulties he or she is having with English in case of my students, or with Portuguese or with Japanese, no? And we
Mm,
give them some hints about some culture, no? Some phrases
okay. Yeah.
that might produce a misunderstanding and can go to a very serious problem, especially for those sessions where we are not present, these independent sessions, no? Where
Mm-hmm.
we, for example, if you were my partner, we call them friend university, our friend partner.
Mm-hmm.
If you were, you give me your list, I'll give you my list, and we work together pairing students, matching students, probably according to age, probably according to studies, what kind of area they are working with, or
Okay.
interest, or
I
we
see.
just random. That
So
is we decide.
it's not always random. It's you do some selection, some pairing there, right, to set
Yes,
the ground in a positive
exactly.
way, so it's likely to be successful. Okay.
Mm, I have I don't know. We have asked students what they prefer, and sometimes they prefer having a person that is from a different area because they want to learn. But
I
some
see.
others prefer to have the same area.
Right.
So
Mhm.
I wouldn't say that it's better or not. I think
Okay.
that depends on the student. Sometimes we
Hmm.
ask them, sometimes we want them to experience a real well, a real communication in the sense that if you're in the train, or you are in the supermarket, or you want to meet someone in the cafeteria, you don't know what he or she likes or what he or she studies. It's just this short talk you have to begin with, you
Yep.
know. Or if you go to university, you have the diversity, a big diversity of students.
Hmm.
So sometimes we say randomize. Sometimes,
Yep.
but if you don't feel, if you know your students, you know more your students than me, because mine are volunteers. They do not belong to a group.
Okay.
And my partners usually are from a classroom. So the teacher has more,
Okay. So there's a
knows more
bit
a
of
little bit.
I see a little bit of a difference there depending on
And
the
she tells me,
situation.
no, look, she's very shy. I think it should be with a woman, or he's very shy, should be with a man. Because if it is a woman, he is not going to talk. Okay. So with this kind of negotiation between teachers, we send them a letter explaining them, or in the workshop, I explain them. This is the etiquette. This is, you have to answer in certain moment. You have to fulfill this, everything. No, all the rules of
Mm,
the game. And you have to cover 8 sessions, one every 15 days, every 10 days, depending on the curriculum. These are the topics. However, you are free to choose if you don't like the topics. No? And the students get together, they start trying to negotiate times and everything.
uh-huh.
It's very difficult for them. Sometimes they spend 15 days exchanging either WhatsApp line, and they do not get an agreement. And it's very demotivating for them.
Right.
And sometimes they immediately click and match, and they start doing everything, and they continue being friends sometimes. So it's a challenge for students, and it is a challenge for us as teachers
It
as
sounds
well.
like an organizational challenge for you.
Organizational challenge, and the workshop help us diminish. this kind of intercultural misunderstandings.
So I'm
No?
quite interested in that. So yeah, could you talk a bit more about the kind of groundwork that you do to prepare them for these intercultural misunderstandings or
Well,
yeah.
that, for example, during the workshop, which is a 2-hour workshop, we
Okay.
usually tell them, for example, if we're working with Japanese students, for example, we know that Japanese students, sometimes Mexicans has told us that it's very difficult to get a conversation with them because Mexicans feel they are not being paid attention in the questionnaires we have made them, no? So we tell them, okay, look, Japanese, if they make these sounds or these noises or these movements, they are paying you attention, but they are not going to make a sound, no? Or try to speak about this. And it's very common that if you start mentioning some of these topics, the Japanese advisor, which is Japanese, who is Japanese as well, she gives them some hints of how to start making conversation with a Japanese student. No?
Okay.
For example, the advisor from Brazil, well, she's a Mexican and she teaches the Brazilian variant from Portuguese. She speaks to Mexican students and tell them, don't worry if the Brazilian start asking you your telephone number, if they are asking you what you like, they are not pretending to be more than your friends. This is the way they do it. No, these kind of little things we are asking them to not to be surprised or be angry, for example, or for certain words that they shouldn't be said in Spanish or in English or in Japanese or something, or topics that you shouldn't deal with. This is the
Right.
kind of things we are working with them.
Right.
And during the sessions, the advisors send them little material made with Canvas or through WhatsApp, like saying, we are talking about friendship. Remember to mention this, but not to mention this. No,
It's
using opposite structures.
it needs a lot of expertise and
Yes.
experience from the coordinating staff. It sounds like a lot of background with each of the cultures that's involved. And yeah, so then it's not people from multiple different cultural contexts at the same time. You've got two contexts with then two sets of students that are from those contexts and then two experts as well,
Yeah.
facilitators who are kind of making it happen. I see. Okay.
Yeah, we have had some that had been multicultural. For example, I think the one that has been the most challenging for me has been one that we made with China, because it was China, United States of Mexico. We call them triandem, not tandem. And we called
Okay.
it triandem because the American teacher, who was from Argentina, but from original from China, so it was she wanted to speak about some global issues, such as migration, racism, ecology. But they wanted, for example, to speak in English, in Spanish, and only Spanish to practice Spanish between Chinese and Americans. And I said, yeah, but my Mexicans, they would be interested in the topic, of course, but they would need to practice a little bit more than Spanish because they are going to be the experts. In that sense, they're going to help the other two. So what we did is that we spoke 30 minutes about one topic, these global topics, in Spanish. Later, the Americans got out of the room and the Mexicans spoke in Chinese with the Chinese students. The challenge here was that in Spanish, the topics were very, very complex to discuss. There were arguments, looking at point of views. We had to teach them how to give a point of view, but the Mexicans were the ones who were trying to help the Americans and the Chinese how to express opinions in Spanish and in Mexican Spanish. No? Because the Chinese had a Spanish teacher from Spain.
I see.
And the Americans had a Spanish teacher from Argentina.
Okay.
And my students were Mexicans. So it was very, very interesting. Students were very, very happy. But in Chinese, my students do not get a very advanced level. So they spoke a very simple simple topics, just like how to present yourself, how to talk about your likes and dislikes, about movies, about more basic things. That was very, very complex, but I think students enjoyed it a lot. They liked it a lot because there were 3 cultures interacting.
No, it sounds interesting, but they often start with these kind of more day-to-day, you know, topics that are kind of to break the ice first,
yes,
before getting
we
on
usually
to
make a break and we say, be careful, not as many things, just an icebreaker, no? But it's wonderful. It's a very nice, and that's why the workshop is important. We stopped the workshops like 2 years ago, and it was a big mistake.
Okay.
It was a very big mistake because we had sometimes misunderstandings. Students didn't know how to give feedback, for example.
No.
So they say, how can I tell him that he's wrong, that he doesn't feel offended, or when should I correct, when shouldn't I correct? So the workshop will help us to do this with our students, no? Or students from the the counterpart, for example, our friends' universities, they didn't correct because sometimes my students are older than they.
Okay. Right, so there's all kinds of different like power dynamics there.
Yes, exactly. Okay. So in the workshop, that's what we deal with now. We are going to start again. We have started already, but we're going to start again with more systematic help because students have asked us to do those. So
okay, so that's workshop takes place before. I'm wondering, does it also take place after to help them reflect and process the experience?
Yes. We asked them for this first workshop with intercultural feedback and everything goes in the beginning. And also we explain them how many sessions they should cover. We ask them a learning diary every session or every 2 sessions, depending on how many sessions, because we have teletandems that require 16 sessions. That means 2 sessions every week, sometimes or 1 section every week. So 16 diaries becomes boring for them.
Okay.
So we ask them 2 or every 3 sessions to write a learning diary.
Okay.
Where they ask about what they learned, what they need to work with, and what they feel proud of.
Okay. And you said recently the students are a little resistant to reflection, or they don't like slowing down a bit, but they kind of comply with this. They're doing the reflection diaries.
Some of them we haven't motivated them enough yet. No, we have asked them for example, sometimes say, yes, if you get it, you get, for example, in the self-access center, we don't give any paper that tells that can prove that they have done all this work. No, so we tell them if you have most of your learning diaries, we give them a paper like a diploma or a thankful or a thanks something that so you can show your teacher or you can put it in your CV.
Right.
No?
Right. Yeah, it's nice to quantify it in that way for them.
It worked in the beginning, not anymore. But
okay.
Well, now we are going to try any other. We are trying, for example, now something that I learned now that I went to Japan that I liked a lot is the passport.
Okay.
So we might try the passport and give them something.
Yes, that's quite common here. I've worked in self-access center before that had that.
And here in Mexico is not very common, but probably it can work because it's something new. It can they might like it. No?
Yes, it's an interesting one about where that sits in the autonomy kind of framing of self-access.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
It's like
kind of incentivizing behavior in that way. But yes, it's useful.
For example, you told me about this reflection, and because of that, well, the learning diary is one. But for example, there are some teletandems, especially the one from Portuguese in Brazil. They are 1 hour and a half because it's 1 hour of practice, the 30 minutes and the 30 minutes.
Okay.
But the third 30 minutes are with the advisors, and they are talking about what they learned, what they did, what problems they got.
Right. Okay,
we call them mediation.
Okay, and that's both students from both sides are there?
Yes, students from both sides. Sometimes one mediation goes in Spanish. Sometimes the next, for example, pair sessions go in Spanish. Odd sessions go in Portuguese.
Mm-hmm.
So they are practicing the language, both languages as well, and they feel comfortable expressing how they felt, the problems they found,
Okay.
how they faced
So
them.
even if they're not so able to engage in the written reflection, the kind of live spoken, kind of reflective dialogue mediated by
Exactly.
the external person, the external but I guess trusted
Mm,
person who is there,
Yeah.
kind
Well,
of facilitates that.
you have just mentioned the key idea. For example, we use kind of reflective dialogue because, for example, from our side, all of them are advisors. So most of the advisors from the Self-Access Center work on the process of learning more than on the linguistic aspect.
Of course, yeah.
No, so many of the questions during this mediation goes from the like kind of advising, and we use a sort of reflective dialogue. Exactly.
Yeah. And yeah, I'm wondering what is the main benefit, if you had to sum it up, of this, of all the experience you've had running these teletandems, and then particularly in terms of autonomy, like how does it facilitate that? If you had to sum it up, what would it be?
Yes, I think Teletandem as such does not develop autonomy. I think it's a very good trigger for autonomy. That's the way I would define it. Why it's a very good trigger? Because it gives the student the opportunity to practice this autonomy in the sense of reflecting on his own, trying to make decisions about what he needs to do in order to improve for the next session of the Teletandem.
Mm.
However, it needs a guidance. That's why I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't say that Teletandem is the answer. I would say that Teletandem, with a good guidance from the advisor or a good mediation, could develop autonomy very, very well because it gives the students the opportunity to practice it.
Mm. Mm. It's mediated.
Yes, I would say Teletandem is like the mean for autonomy. That's what I would call it.
Oh, that's fascinating. And do your students report this, or do the participants report this afterwards?
Yes, well, actually, my master's degree was talking about autonomy in Teletandem. And that
Okay.
was one of my findings, that Teletandem didn't develop autonomy as such. Students started to show certain uh, features of autonomous learner once the advisor asked them.
Okay.
Sorry, but if you didn't ask them, they didn't make this reflection.
Right. Right.
In this work, I found this, that they need something else to reflect, but they say that Teletandem make them make better decisions than before, for example, and some certain kind of identities. They say that they
Mm.
found that the fact that they identify with the other as a student was very, very helpful because they feel confident, they feel identified, and they realize that other learners have the same problems as they have.
Yes. Yeah. Seeing the other person as a person. Right.
Exactly. See
Yeah.
the other person as a
Relatability.
person.
Mm.
And I think in the self-concept and autonomy would work a lot. That's why I think that that the Teletandem is like a trigger.
I see. Right. I'm also just, it occurs to me, like, do you track in any way whether these experiences become the start of longer friendships or
Yes.
longer relationships? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Can you
not all of
talk
them.
about? Yeah,
Yes,
of course.
we have found, for example, sometimes some students have told me they have gone to the country and they have met in Japan, in Italy,
Oh,
in
okay.
China,
Mm-hmm.
in England, on the United States, for example. We have a very nice one, which because my self-access center can also accept workers, and this was like probably a 60-year-old worker from a library in my university, and he was practicing Teletandem, and he liked Teletandem because he says that in Teletandem he can be himself.
Okay.
And I matched him with another teacher. Well, he was also a worker from another, who was learning Spanish, because we also works with sometimes retired people, especially from schools in the United States. They are
Oh, I
retired
see.
Americans.
Right, that's great.
So
Oh,
they
this is
met,
the
they
third
clicked,
age thing.
and
Okay.
they have been together. He has gone to the United States. He has come to Mexico, and they have years of a friendship. For example, that's a very nice one, and I liked it very much. And I had another who got married so later, after some years of they met. They married as he was from Mexico and she was from Kansas, from the University of Kansas, where I used to have our teletandem. They practice in teletandem. They continue the friendship, and after 6 or 7 years, they got married.
Oh, right. Okay.
We have pictures from students who have come to Mexico or who have come to
Mhm.
Mediateca, for example,
Right, right.
and to tell us that to meet Mediateca, where they learned when they met their partners, no, from the Mexican partners, from Canada, for example, from Nansan we have here, from Italy I don't remember, but usually Mexicans have gone to Italy.
Okay.
What else? From Russia we haven't got. From Brazil, some students have come to Mexico or some have gone to Brazil and met their
hmm
partners as well.
hmm
So yes, we have not so many, well, not as many, because we usually work with 300 to 400 students every semester in this
Right.
teletandem from all the languages. But let's see, like at least 10 of those hundreds get a very good friendship, and it
Okay.
continue for the rest
I think
of their life.
that's a really good result there if you manage to get that. And even
Yes,
for the students who, sorry, the participants, I suppose I should say, the participants who don't go on to get married to their teletandem partner, it's probably, I would imagine this is an experience that they wouldn't have had otherwise.
yes.
Right. So yeah, in
And
Mexico, I
actually,
guess
one of the
it's
rules.
rare to meet a Japanese student, a Russian, a Portuguese, all in one place. So you're still facilitating that kind of unusual, special experience for them.
Yes, and it's a challenge because when we began Teletandem, it was they sometimes they saw it like we had to make these rules because they wanted to get a girlfriend or a boyfriend. Say, hey, this is for academic purposes. If we find out that you are trying to do something else, please, you are going to be out of the program. So that's why we
Mm,
set rules. Because
okay.
in the beginning, we've got some misunderstandings and we had to mediate with the other teachers and everything. So
Right.
there
Mhm,
have been
mhm,
very
mhm.
few cases. I mean, in
I
15
see.
years, one
But
or two
good to
cases.
know. Good to know
Wow.
about the potential pitfalls that are out there. So it occurs to me that it's a little similar in some ways to what's also quite popular at the moment, which is COIL,
Yeah.
the kind of collaborative online project-based learning. Is the difference between the two that the Teletandem is mostly just focused on the casual kind of language interaction rather than collaborating on a shared project?
Yes. Actually, that's one of the main differences.
Okay.
COIL usually goes to work on making knowledge, and usually they work, at least in Mexico, usually they work on a lingua franca, Spanish or English only. There is not a linguistic exchange as such.
Right.
And Teletandem, it's the main mission. It's the objective is working with the language in the most natural way. No,
Mm,
working with the culture and the language. We are not working on we can work on projects. I mean, we have worked on projects with Teletandem, but usually it's 30 minutes, and this always this focus on or either on culture or the linguistic performance.
hmm hmm
No, and COIL is different because usually COIL involves more than two people. Usually it's
Yeah.
three or four or five
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
work on making a project. Okay, something seems multidisciplinary. No, UNAM works with COIL. Usually it has worked with Spanish, not with different languages. No,
hmm
and because we're having a problem on language, the students sometimes do not have the level for a project and discuss about a project in the language.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, it's all of that planning is quite tough.
Exactly. And if it's
Like
in
you were talking
English,
about before, scheduling meetings and things
exactly.
is quite a technical task with very specific vocabulary and expectations. Yeah.
But I find that Teletandem could be a useful tool for those students who want to have COIL afterwards, because
Mm.
it gives them this fluency, this confidence about their oral production.
Uh-huh.
No, it's like a preparation for COIL, I
I
think.
see. That's
I
interesting
see
that you put it
Teletandem as
sequentially in that way. Have you ever done that?
not yet.
Oh, okay.
Not yet.
Okay. Is that a future dream or a future aspiration?
Yeah, a future dream, yeah, would be. My university is also making a lot of emphasis on COIL,
Mm.
and they have expressed this problem, no, that they are working only with South America or some other universities in Mexico because of time difference and because of language level.
Mm.
No, the point is we can have it the language level, but some other students lose this opportunity because of the language. No, because they
Right.
don't have the language level. If you want to do it with Japan and the level of both students is not enough, you're not going to get the project
Okay.
because they are going to be struggling with the language.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, so they have done it, and when they express it, we make the point that probably Teletandem can be like the preparation for these students to get into COIL afterwards, or
I
to work it at
see.
the same time. No,
Mm.
let's work
Hmm.
Teletandem with some topics, or the self-access center can be helpful for the COIL. Prepare
Sure.
for your linguistic performance or all your language performance in the self-access center with Teletandem, and later you can go to COIL.
I see. No, that makes a lot of sense.
So you get the tools for a COIL, no?
Yep. Yeah, of course. So
In the future, I hope. Yes.
yes, no, that's definitely an interesting potential future development. I realize I've taken a lot of your time already,
No, it's okay.
but
Don't worry.
just I suppose in closing, I guess I would want to ask you if somebody was considering starting up a Teletandem project, how would you advise them based on your extensive experience doing this for, it sounds like decades now across multiple languages, from people from different cultures, different continents? What are some of the key things, the most important things that a new person should do coming in to make sure that their Teletandem project succeeds?
I think the first, it's to think it in do it with a friend. I would say
Oh,
the first thing.
a friend from
Most,
a
or
partner
a
university.
friend from another
Oh,
country that you have
I
met in a
see.
conference, for example,
I
probably, or
see. Do it yourself, right?
I would say that I think the partner on the counterpart of we call it the French university, La Universidad Amiga, should be either your friend or someone you trust in him or her.
Hmm.
Why? Because you can work together in this path, so you don't feel alone. I would say
Hmm.
something, and he can understand you, or something like that, and you can
Hmm.
trust the other person, and you can work, and you can, because the people who are trying to do Teletandem, they should negotiate and speak a lot between them because of what happens to the students, what they are doing. They should be in in constant communication when this program is running. So I would say the first thing is do it with someone you trust,
Okay.
a friend, someone you met, and just use it. The first thing when you want to try it, do it with your classroom, with your class, no, or with a group of students that you find them that you have selected probably and you find reliable.
Right.
No, that would be the second. Try not to mix a lot with don't know it with a far away country. so the So the time difference is not a big
Yep.
problem. It's something that you
Okay.
don't have to deal with a lot with. No, because even for us, even for years, there's always one day or one session they say we are already connected. To say, yeah, but it's not time. Say, yeah, but it's we miss the summertime or the winter time in
Uh-huh.
summertime. So That would be something I would recommend, and only to do it in a small, with a small group, no more than 15 students, I would recommend. Because you need time to prepare it, to see what's going on with your students, So that's something I would recommend for people who want to do Teletandem, or especially if both of you are beginners. If you are working with a person that is not a beginner, that has done Teletandem, it would be better, no?
Okay.
But not all the Teletandem, it is, and it's Teletandemers, we can say. We are many, no? But the world is very big, and you never have the chance to speak with someone who has already done it, no?
Mhm.
But and I also, if you want to do it, and if you are new, you can contact me anytime, and I would really help you to do it.
Well, that's a nice offer. Well, yeah, I think if those are your main pieces of advice, that's
Yes,
very,
I
very
would say.
helpful. I think that's a nice note to leave on there. So I just wanted to say, Adelia, that was a really, really fascinating conversation. I enjoyed it a lot.
Thank you very much. I hope I haven't spoken too much. I am very passionate about Teletandem and autonomy, but I hope you can make use of something like this. Thank
Oh,
you
no,
very
no,
much for the invitation.
no, absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, I hope this is an enjoyable episode for everybody. All right, so thank you very much. All right, take
Thank
care.
you. Bye.